It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
Alrighty, welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast podcasted around about weekly for the last year from Kitchen Bench in Kingsland, Auckland, New Zealand. This is number 50, folks. Started off this passion project late November, just after the 40th in 2016. So let's call this that I've smashed the 2017 season. 50 episodes. Pretty darn stoked. I'm going to spend the next wee while before I chat about my guest for the 50th. Just thanking a few people, man. I went to put this final episode up yesterday to try and get the last 3 or 4 up within the exact time limit, but after doing a couple of other intros, I'm like, I really want to give the last one a bit more leg room, because it was a bit weird. So it was sort of I find the monologues at the beginning often the things that I ponder the most before I do them, and it was starting to feel like a bit of a Vegas cabaret performance after 2 or 3 yesterday. So here's some thanks. What about the episodes? 1 to 50: Thomas Watts, Otis Frizzell, Mikey Tucker, Nathan Nutty, Fergus Aitken, Dave Peck, Dave Roper, Russell Brown, Mark Slave, Williams. Then we had, he quickly turns the page, Verity Johnson, John, J-Star Ayers, Ursula Grace, Mark Cuby, Mikey Havoc, Di Henwood, Mike Hodgson, Adam Rickett, Patrick Waller, Kirsty Johnston, the artist, Paul Walsh. Then we're up to number 30, David Riddler. Number 31, Guy Kappa. 32, the one like Greg Churchill. 33, Rob Warner came in and talked Dance Till Dawn and Battling the Council. Nick Atkinson of Supergroove, and now Hopetown Brown came in and got sexy for number 34. Julian Boschia made a film about Head Like a Hole, and he came and visually rattled about that, and I banged away at the layers and we got through to a soft centre by the end. Bobby Brazuki came in for 36. The polarising Simon Sweetman for 37. Hi, Simon. He's a regular listener. 38 was Leon Dahl. 39, Jeremy Parkinson. Number 40, the guy from up the road who runs the old radio station there, Dylan Chase. Then for 41, Elizabeth Allen. 42, Scott Blanks. He's run the comedy club down the road, the only dedicated comedy club in New Zealand for 20 years. He's the Don of comedy. 43 was Mike Weston. 44, the King, Kapisi. 45, Toby Muir. 46, Theo Gibson, getting close now. 47, Alan McElroy, a very enjoyable episode just posted recently, as they all are. Number 48, Andy Van. Number 49, the Cog, behind Cog Transmissions, Chris Chetland. And today, number 50, my guest, Frank Booker, who I'll get to in a sec. Just some other thank yous. Thanks to Hallertau, particularly Dave. He was just a listener and started sending beer to give to guests, which was lovely. Some of it made to the guests. Other times they'd come over at 9 a.m. It didn't really quite seem right. I've gone through a lot of coffee, though, but I like how Hallertau they just support stuff, and he didn't expect me to give wee shout-outs, but of course you do. What else are you going to do? And it's lovely beer, too. Also, some particular listeners. Thank you, all of you. I don't know with the analytics how accurate they are, but I feel like there are, for what this is, a number of people listening. And for the first year, I purposely haven't kind of paid promoted it or moved it out of social media, but I plan to give it some boost next year maybe and see how we go. The best thing you can do to support the show if you've enjoyed an episode or 2 or 50 is just share, leave comments where possible and all of that. That's how we build up a bit more of a movement of people. But particular listeners, my dear old compadre Malcolm, who I've not seen enough of in the last 20 years, who now lives in Sweden, always said he wanted to marry a blonde Swedish woman. He actually didn't say he wanted to marry one, but he did say he'd like to connect with one, and now he has a family. But anyway, I digress. Got in contact pretty much every episode and said thanks, I really enjoyed that, and in a weird way I think it's brought us closer again, even though he's only hearing what I'm up to and not vice versa. Similarly, David Lawrence, another childhood friend who's been giving me good feedback pretty regularly since we've reconnected. Mike King, not the comedian, my buddy Mike King, who got onto the pod bike late and has been all over it and trying to get me guests and so on and enjoying them. And also Paul Walsh, who was a guest but also designed the logo, but also has commented on other people's posts I've seen. You know, when they say what's a good podcast, he says, well, you should listen to this one, and links it to this. And probably lastly, Maren down in Wellington, who said more than once, you should do it. You're the right kind of person to do it. So all of those people were a motivation. Thank you. What time are we up to now? God, don't know those people. Just under 5 minutes. My last 3 thank yous are, I said a few weeks ago that the subscription for the website was coming up again, and obviously I could afford it, but I said, you know, as a measure of sort of support of this sort of grassroots project, could you perhaps donate? So I've got 3, what do you call them? Patrons? 3 patrons. A gentleman I don't know from Adam, Tama. Thank you so much, mate. Figured out living over in Australia. Obviously, like the show, you know, donated a good wedge, as did they're my friends as well, but a lovely thing to do, Jane and Felix. So big ups, you 3. You pretty much paid for the next year of web connectivity. So we'll keep the shows up. I'm probably going to pack down the mics for the next few weeks and figure out what I'm doing next year with it. But the main thing is the site stays live for another year, and if you are a new listener, or you haven't got to as many as you want, all 50 will sit there for a while. And if a guest falls into my lap next week or whatever, another one may go up. But we'll figure out something regular, but perhaps not as regular for next year, maybe every fortnight. I've got to think it on through. Okay, excuse me. Frank Booker's real name is Chris Cox. I met him many years ago, and like a couple of other people I've chatted about on the podcast, someone who I've not spent a lot of hours with, but someone who I feel a kind of natural connection with. He actually mentioned that after the episode, that it was easy conversation, and the badoom bada was well timed. Kindred spirits, perhaps. He talks about DJing for Prince, a bunch of other stuff, but really I'd like to get out of the way because I'd hate to lose people who've just come here for Frank, and just hear this annoying guy with a New Zealand accent nattering on about some project they've not heard of. So enjoy Frank / Chris. Thank you everyone for listening over the year. Drop a message somewhere. You can always private message on the old Facebook or wherever. That's right, Facebook, Verbal Highs Podcast, Twitter @Verbal Highs. Like the show and subscribe on iTunes, all that good stuff. All right, here we go. Ba-boom.
This is Dr. Tannen's Verbal Highs. Yeah, I guess it's more if I'm too raucous or loud or anything, just tell me to,
okay,
dial it down.
You're going to bring the party.
Well, sometimes I do if I get animated.
I like that. I'm excited. I had an Irish comedian over the other day, and he started he was acting out half the stories he was telling, kind of like, must be because he's so used to being on stage. So I was darting around there. Actually, yes, I can tell you, because by the time this one goes out, it's in order. This is number 50.
Yeah.
So in the last few days, number 46 was a guy that built an electric car from scratch. He bought an old 1990 Toyota.
Wow.
And totally pulled out anything to do with petrol or oil.
Yeah.
What do you call that? Combustion engine?
Yeah.
Yeah, and made it completely electric. And then did a doco about it while he was doing it.
Wow.
47 was Alan, the Irish comedian.
Yeah.
48 was Andy Van.
Yeah.
49, Auckland OG.
Yeah.
49 was Chris Chetland from COG.
Oh, wow. Yeah, cool.
And here we are, 50, Mr. Frank Booker.
Hello.
Also known as Chris Cox. I had to laugh on Discogs. It said your alias was Chris Cox.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like...
Yeah. It gets confusing even to me. I mean, we can talk about that.
Well, I was going to post. I like to post. I posted Dubhead under his real name. I posted King Kapisi under his real name. But then I realised if you're on a phone, I put the pseudonym as the title that appears on your laptop or whatever.
Yeah.
But the real name is the only thing that appears on the phone. I was realising people would be like, "Who's Bill Urali?
Yeah.
Who's Chris Cox?" And so I was looking online, man, and you've got You've got a lot of followings and plays and streams. Frank Booker's quite a globally well-known name in your scene, man.
Well, thank you. It's always good to start with some flattery, isn't it? Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't even know how to respond to that, apart from just thank you. That's very, very kind. Very kind.
My guest today, Frank Booker, is a DJ, producer and educator based in Auckland City. He's quietly built a worldwide reputation for incredible sets and edits. His main claim to fame may well be that he was the DJ of choice for Prince during his tour, rest in peace, obviously, in 2016. How did that come about, man? And were you kind of like, what do I put in that box?
Well, yeah, let's tell the Prince story, because it's always a good one. I never really get tired of telling it, but it was very, very last minute. And, you know, can I give some full disclosure here?
Totally.
Because let's just go in straight away with some revelations.
Okay.
Rest in peace, Prince. But I gotta say, in the kind of Hall of Greats or whatever, Prince is not my number one. You know, like Marvin Gaye, Stevie, people like that were kind of like the, you know, I love like soul music and all of that sort of associated genres with that is what I do and what I've always tried to do. But Prince was always a strange kind of blind spot for me.
I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean, because you're like, cause who you are and what you do. It's kind of like, shit, I'm supposed to be. This guy's supposed to be Holy Grail for me.
So this is what, and I kind of only saying that, you know, not to be disrespectful of Prince or anything like, because what an incredible musician and, you know, amazing. But you know, for me, it was just one of those things. And you have certain musicians like that. I think with people, you know, because I've become known for this sort of, you know, disco and boogie, soul, funk, as well as house and stuff like that. People just sort of automatically presume. But I don't have a huge amount of Prince records.
But he wouldn't want to. Prince wouldn't want to hear Prince records at his party.
So this is where it gets interesting.
Right.
So anyway, let's give you the full kind of rundown on it. But basically, it was a very, very last minute thing. So against that backdrop, the tickets he was doing a solo show, right? It was him and a piano, you know, singing and whatnot. And to all accounts, it just sounded unbelievable. You know, and so of course now I deeply regret not going. Yeah. But at the time, I remember saying to a friend who had seen him play with a full band.
It's probably Daniel.
No, it was Kurt Dyer.
Dan and I went to the Greatest Hits one mid-2000s or something in Melbourne.
Yes. So, Daniel Veach. No, it wasn't Dan. It was another friend, Kurt, who'd seen him play in Sydney. Yeah. And he was sort of umming and ahhing, and I don't think he went to the side. And he was a much bigger Prince fan than me. Yeah. But I remember talking to him like, oh, man, it's, you know, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll wait until he comes back with a band. Da-da-da. And so that was that. And, of course, you know, when the tickets came out, it was like, you know, they went like that. You know, and I actually, you know, some people I work with at Mains were just straight in there and, you know, got their tickets and everyone was like, oh, you going? And I was like, nah, man, I snoozed, I lost. And, you know, I'll wait. I'll go when he comes. When he comes with Sheila E., you know, I'm there. That's me.
What we know now, huh?
And what we know now. And I've had that so many times. I did the same shit with James Brown when he came here. Yeah. I did the same thing with Dilla, like a couple of months before he passed, when I was living in the UK, and he played the Jazz Cafe with Slum Village, and it was like, and actually that was different because everyone knew that he was really unwell. Yeah, I'm like, oh, you should go, and I was like, I don't know, man. It's a bit
of a morbid approach to gigs, though. I better go just in case.
Yeah, in case he dies. This person might die, so yeah, I'll go. Yeah. So anyway, flash forward to the day of the show when Prince is actually in Auckland, and I get a call in the afternoon, actually just after I'd finished teaching a class, and it was a Wednesday that he played here, and it was a guy called Vinci who does a lot of bookings for me at a few venues in the city, and the main one that he was doing for me at the time was the Rooftop of Seafarers, so this sort of reasonably fancy kind of members club vibe.
V-Shell was involved in setting that up.
V was involved,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Yep, that's right. And then, so this guy Vincey would sort of... And at the time, I was playing up there quite a bit. And so anyway, it was a brilliant conversation because he called me up and goes, "Hey, man, what are you doing tonight?" And I knew it would be about a gig. It wasn't like a social call. Let's go and hang out, because he knows I'm a dad and it's a Wednesday. And I was like, well, it's a Wednesday, so I don't know, probably not a whole lot. Yeah. And he was like, so I've just been asked by the promoter for Prince that he wants to have a bit of an after party after his show, and he wants a DJ who can play funk. And I thought of you. Are you keen? And I was like, yeah, we can do that. Yeah. But I just found it more humorous, to be honest. Like it wasn't like oh my God, like if it was Stevie Wonder, then I really would have lost my mind and been like, oh my God, and probably been really nervous. But because I didn't have this big history, and I'm not trying to say that to be like...
Probably nice way to come into it, though.
Yeah.
Rather than losing your shit.
And so then it got really funny because Jason Eli, who's my work colleague at Mains, is a huge Prince
professional
fan.
Jealousy.
Oh my God! And he is also,
and he could probably hold that show. He could have held that gig down too.
Well, he also is the nicest man. He's incredibly lovely dude, very even tempered, and not one to get shitty.
No.
And so I got off the phone, and we were in the office, and I was like, "Guess where I'm playing tonight." I couldn't resist just being a bit of a prick about it. I was like, "Guess where I'm playing tonight?"
Yeah.
And he was like, just kind of like, what? Like only half listening. And I was like, I'm going to DJ for Prince. And he lost it. He actually got angry. Was like he was, I could kind of see that he was like excited, but the overriding emotion was anger. It was like, what the fuck? He's like, you don't even like him, because we'd had this same conversation.
A music nerd conversation.
He was like, oh, I'm a huge fan. I was like, yeah, you know what? I can take it or leave it.
And so for everyone listening, the question in my mind would be how the party rolled out. And I know with those eccentric characters, like, did he even show up? Was he there a minute? Was he there 2 hours?
Yeah, I mean the whole thing was quite surreal, and I mean straight away, like my first thought was,
and who in New Zealand? Sorry to cut you off. Who in New Zealand, in terms of, I was thinking, like, who gets invited to the actual party? Like, who does he know here? There's all of that as well.
Yeah, I think they just sort of. I'm not 100% on that, but I feel like they kind of, the venue just cherry picked a few people, and people that were either, friends of theirs, but it was really cool. It was actually quite a music crowd. It wasn't like one of those bullshit spy New Zealand Herald going to the opening of an envelope because that's what you do. It was, music heads like Jean Duval, Marek from Wellington.
Yeah.
There were people who were genuine fans who were like really excited to be there.
And he turned up for a period? He
did turn up. I mean, if I can just rewind for a second, the funniest part about it was earlier in the evening, I went up there knowing that he would be at the show, and the directive was, you probably start playing around midnight because that's when his second show finishes. So start playing at midnight and we'll go till we finish, maybe 4 o'clock or something like that. So I went up there and I told a couple of people, but I was conscious of the fact that I couldn't put it out there in terms of, I'm not going to go on Facebook and be like, hey guys, da-da-da. I did that later, but...
I was just going to say, hang on, how do I know about this?
No, I did that after the fact. But I was like, I can't do that because everyone will hit me up and be like, can I come?
Yeah.
But then I kind of came to the point where I was like, actually, I feel like I need someone with me so we both know that it's real and it actually happened.
Well, probably you were actually a bit nervous or whatever, but it's not a normal.
No, it's not a normal gig. It was, I guess I probably... You
needed pit crew.
Yeah, and so I called up my good friend Sam Harmon, who DJs in the name Samuel Harmony, does Friendly Potential parties in Auckland now, and he's like old friend of mine. And so I called him up and told him, and he's a very excitable dude. So he was incredibly just like, oh my God, don't believe it. And I was like, do you want to come? And he's like, hell yeah, let's do it, man. Da. So we got up there and we started having a few beers and stuff. And, then his manager, I got to meet the manager, and this is where it all went quite surreal. So, very business, matter of fact. I'm not sure if it was like his permanent manager, it might have just been a tour manager.
Yeah.
But they were very kind of business about stuff and gave me an NDA, non-disclosure agreement.
Right, and here we are now.
Yeah, and here we are now because, come and find me if you want,
Yeah.
But anyway, the NDA was more about, I guess not broadcasting the fact that I was there, not recording the set, and then kind of cashing in on it later.
And you know what? Like we don't even have to say this, but it's just typical etiquette that you'd follow anyway.
Yeah, totally.
Like I don't even like people with video phones.
No,
and when I'm dancing in general, anyway.
No, and I wouldn't. It wasn't. I had no problem kind of signing it. I found it humorous, but I was like, oh, these are all things that I would,
Yeah.
It was more, I think it was more along the lines of him, because, it's hard for people to remember now.
They've got to do it. There'd be one idiot in every 100 people.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and everyone would, so I think anyone who went to the party was told no phones, no photos, which is cool. Like, I'm like, that's fine, man, because otherwise the next day would have been full of stupid, crappy photos of him and people just getting in his shit. And why would you go out if you felt like,
Yeah.
I mean, it was like he was in a zoo as it was when he did turn up, because everyone was just, oh my God. Like,
is he flanked with detail even in New Zealand? Like, has he got big,
yeah,
security dudes around him and stuff?
I think he had a couple of people. He had a really beautiful girl with him.
Yeah.
Why
wouldn't you?
But the other thing is, sorry, just to go back.
You signed the...
I signed the NDA, and this is a great thing, like, because I'd had a couple of beers, so I was happy to be there. I was excited about it, and I was like, well, and I thought about it for a moment, like, oh, what would happen if I said no, I'm not signing this, and they'd probably just kick me out and get another DJ. And so I said, yeah, I'll sign it. And then I looked at the manager and was like, as I had held my pen over the thing, I was like, so does this mean Prince owns my soul? And the guy just looked at me like no humour whatsoever. And I'm like...
Yeah, that's like joking through airport security.
Yeah, yeah. And I was just like, okay, just kidding. And then as I went to sign, I was like, but he does, doesn't he? And then he kind of like cracked a smile a little bit.
Oh, good.
But then, after I signed it, he goes, okay, 2 more things. Don't play any of his music.
Totally.
And I was like, you know what? I got that covered, mate.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
not a problem. And not that I wouldn't have done that shit. Anyway,
but imagine, dropping like the most obvious Purple Rain or something.
Or 1999, when he turns up.
Like the whole... if you're not a music person, you're probably not finding that funny, but you probably are at the same time.
Yeah. So the guy goes, don't play any of his music. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And he goes, and no profanity. So no music with swear words or anything. Because he was Jehovah's Witness.
Right.
So he was quite, they were quite direct about that. And I was like, you got the right man for the job, man. I'm a soul music guy, so I don't even think I own many records that have got cussing.
It's crazy. Just the link is very tenuous, but weird. To Mike, he and Michael, their level of stardom, talent, etc., etc., etc. Both on the same crazy industrial grade smack. Both Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It's so weird.
Both sort of tortured by the level of their fame in terms of what they could and can't do sort of in the real world. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, and just that prescription meds thing is just it's rife in the States.
Dude,
as well,
honestly, there's some amazing. A guy wrote a book. A journalist went out to do one little story. This is not going to be a great story on my part, and that I can't remember his name, but he was on a podcast I listened to a lot. So basically, the small story he went out to do on something tangentially related to that turned into a whole book on the what they call the sort of not hillbilly heroin, but the legal heroin crisis, which has now turned to, once the legal scripts dry up, the Mexicans import this black tar stuff.
I think I've read this book.
You've read it. It's an amazing story.
But again, to continue the crapness of the story,
Oh,
I
sorry.
can't remember the. No, I can't remember the title of the book. So you can't remember the author.
I thought you meant the Finishing the Prince story.
No, I can't remember the title.
The title of the book. There's lots of stuff out about it there now. But it's funny, the whole legal versus illegal drugs, that time-old debate and stuff. Most of America is, and the stats actually say this when I say most, or a lot of adults are either on legal amphetamines or legal smack. It's the most medicated country in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, and it's just...
They've got a big pets on Prozac culture now. Vets putting dogs on antidepressants. It's like it lives in an apartment, and you don't take it out for walks every day.
That's why it's sad. just take him to the park; he'll be fine. So anyway, in hindsight, I mean, at the time, obviously, he was, to us, he was alive and well. So it was kind of made it really shocking because it was only 2 months later that he actually passed away.
But you say he's alive and well, he was happening at the party.
To my eyes,
but he was into being at the party and stuff. But he must have been. He called it.
This is the last bit because I don't want to it can't be the whole Prince, we talk about Prince for 2 hours, but the last bit about it that was quite funny was that I started DJing, and it was, mate, you'll know as a DJ, it was a brilliant party to play at because everyone who was there was in such a good mood. They were just on a high from having seen Prince play this amazing show, and they were big fans. People like Mel James, who you might know from, she is an enormous Prince fan.
Plus, there wouldn't be
her and her friend Bianca were there, and they were just like, oh my God, they were having the time of their life. And it was kind of like, you know what? Even if he doesn't turn up, this has been amazing because everyone's just having a great time, and it was kind of, a music kind of crowd, so there was no idiots who were like,
that's what I was going to say. I was going to say you got zero hassle factor there as well.
No hassle from anyone. And then I kind of reached this point where it hit about 2 a.m, and I was like, he's probably not going to turn up. And
so 2, right? That's getting.
And this is, this is a Wednesday night, and then I'll never forget it. This is the really mad thing, and what I really love because it's made this track really special. I was playing a track by Rufus and Shaka Khan called "Live in Me," which is have you heard of Rod Temperton before? He's the guy who co-wrote a lot of the Michael Jackson stuff.
I've heard of,
so Quincy Jones kind of partner in crime. You've got a really sort of soulful music writing style, and often has these big kind of changes and bridges and stuff. And I shit you not, as it went to this crazy change and bridge section on this Rufus tune, everyone started screaming, and I was like, I was a bit oblivious. I was like, man, what a cool crowd! They're
really getting into my records.
They're really into this Rod Temperton shit, man. This is dope. And then I Sam turned around and was like, Book, because he calls me Book. He's like, Book, he's here.
All these people who are normally quite cool cats start screaming. That's quite funny. It turns into a One Direction crowd.
Mate, it really was. And the funniest one was the DJs were honestly, so starstruck. I remember Marek coming up to me and just being like, what are you going to do? Actually,
I'm going to play another record and we're going to keep having a good night.
But just this kind of, oh my God, he's here. And I'm not going to lie, for a minute I was a bit okay, I've got to hold it down, man. I've got to
Well, the thing is, to me, he's like a pop culture, a trope. To me, it's like when I saw Flick in a photo with Snoop Dogg. It's there are people that are the chance of you in your lifetime being in a room with them as pop culture icons, irrespective of where you started with talking about his music and stuff, it's fucking Prince, and he's in the same room as you.
Yeah, and so that was wild. And the funniest part about it was because of his stature, he's 5'3" or something that, probably with his Cuban heels on. And I couldn't really see him because he was in the opposite corner, but Sam, my friend, is probably 6'3" or 6'4", so he was kind of craning his head and giving me reports on what he was doing. So he would turn around to me and go, "Oh, he's sitting down, Book. I don't think he's feeling this." And then I played this track by group called Rare Gems Odyssey.
Oh no, he's giving you blow by blow.
So he was giving me blow by blow,
going.
as I'd play a tune. I played this tune called
Pull that one down.
What is funk? And he was like, "Oh, Book, he's dancing. And so I was like, and then you'd kind of hear the crowd reacting because they could see him dancing, and he was in his little kind of cordoned off velvet rope sort of area. And he didn't stick around for too long. I feel like he was there for like 40 minutes.
He's famous for doing that in different ways or shapes or forms, because what he did at the Melbourne show I went to, so I think it was actually promoted as a greatest hits tour. And to be honest, I really, really love his music, but I'm not deep like a lot of people.
Yeah.
So it probably suited me going to a greatest hits show better.
And
there was other stuff like in the band, like I had Dan next to me, and he was like, "That's Maceo." I'm like, no way. So the band was like full of stars as well.
Yeah,
and they did this thing, I'll get to the thing I was saying about the after show soon, but they're just thinking about the show in general. They did this other crazy thing with, different tiers of seating you could pay for, where there was a tier of seating that was like 3 sets of round tables on each side of the stage with like super uber fans like up there being like dining and maybe not dining, having a few drinks. So they're actually on stage with the show. So at one stage he actually pulled up to the woman from these tables, and I was like, well, those two got their money worth.
Yeah, man.
But anyway, afterwards, and it had been leaked a day or two beforehand. This is pre kind of like internet like we know it now. I just realised it's only mid-2000s, but it was pre everything.
And,
he actually wanted to play afterwards a little exclusive show. So he did it at Melbourne's only jazz venue, which, as you'd probably, when you think of it, it's a small venue.
Yeah.
And there were tales of like, I think the media reported on it, there were like lines that day. It was something like you had to get a ticket before, on the day before the main show and whatever. So the point is he did not only just I'm going to show up, but he actually did a private sort of small show.
Wow. For
those who could get tickets. I mean, what the motivation for that is, I don't know. Maybe he had material to work or whatever. Just likes to perform,
Just a performer,
Welcome to the Prince podcast.
Yeah.
So big couple of years for you. The other one is sort of holy grail names with what you're about is Gilles Peterson gives you a shout out for your radio show the other day. That's pretty cool.
That was cool.
You ever meet him?
In passing, but he wouldn't.
Yeah.
I think I mean, I guess with him, like that, in an interesting way, that means much more to me in terms of like career trajectory.
He's the Don Dada of your style, the way I see it.
I guess so, yeah. And I mean, I think in terms of growing up, and it kind of, I guess after this happened, like with the Worldwide FM thing, like I got asked to do a show showcasing Auckland music, and that was the sort of brief. So I took it really seriously.
You did, and just quickly for everyone, it's worth listening to because it's not. I'm trying to say but it's not just a DJ set. It's actually like a mini doco. You've got little interviews in there. You've got profiles and
exactly. I mean, the idea was okay. Well, in order for this to I guess live up to what it should be as some kind of showcase, it needs to be put together in a way that's just not okay, well, I'll DJ for a bit and then I'll get another mate to DJ for a bit and we'll say what's up a couple of times. It was like, okay, we need to actually dig into this. So I kind of, I hit up a few people for different music, and then got Jeremy Toy in and chatted to him, and Nathan Haynes as well, because I thought that's sort of a good spread of, the music that I'm into, but B, stuff that I guess fits in with this Worldwide FM Gilles Peterson sort of trajectory, where it's like, it's not so much one particular style, but it's, I guess, rooted in, jazz, soul, black music,
but on a global kind of I just realised that's the connection that the world. I didn't even think that Worldwide FM, of course, would be actually it's Giles's project, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Yeah.
So who approached you from them? Is it an operation of staff and stuff? And
yeah, I mean, there's quite a big crew. So I guess he's sort of like the figurehead of the whole thing. But in terms of the day to day, there's a guy called Aaron Levitt, who also works for Stamp the Wax, I think, which is like a UK based website. Who's a really good DJ as well, apparently, I've subsequently heard. But he's the program director. But the connection actually came through a guy who I DJ'd with in Sydney earlier in the year called Mike Hu, who'd done a Sydney show and was telling me about it when I was there. And I was like, oh, my God, that's so cool. And he was like... Yeah,
it's cool, man. I think it's cool you put that up as a permanent thing,
Yeah, and he was like, man, it's great. You can put it together however you want, but... it's sort of the idea is that you bring in some artists and, keep the focus mostly around what's happening in the city. Yeah. Whether it's old or new or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, you should, maybe you and Julian or something like that, Julian Dine could, because he knew Julian. Yeah. He was like, oh, you guys would probably be great to do an Auckland one. I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. So, after that, there's another Australian guy called Alex Intis from Love Supreme crew up in Brisbane who, from what I heard, has basically decided to leave Brisbane, they're doing great parties up there, decided to move to the UK, and basically wrote to Giles saying, I'm coming to work for you.
Good on him.
Just one of those great stories where it's like, grab the bull by the horns, dude, I'm coming, and I really want to.
And maybe it was the right day where he actually cleared that message, whereas he wouldn't have on a
normally
Thursday
it'd be
or
like,
whatever.
Yeah. So anyway, Alex started working there, and then, so he kind of joined the dots, I guess, and then,
That's awesome.
Yeah, it all just kind of came together.
You grew up in Christchurch, eh?
Yeah, man. Yep.
And you're around... I might have recently discovered actually you're a bit younger than me. Have you hit 40 yet?
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were super
People
young.
are always shocked.
No, hang on. I didn't mean it like that. I just realised, let me qualify that. Imagine if there's a woman sitting here and I do that.
Yeah, I know. It'd be like, yeah, great. Cheers, man.
Wow. No, it's because, folks, as with a number of my guests, I have, I know them from years gone by, and you used to come up to our flat for gigs, and I was really young then, so you must have been like late teens or something.
Yeah, I probably would have been.
But back to the Christchurch thing. So I'm guessing, like a lot of us, the entry point being the era and the time and stuff was you as a raver. Were you a raver?
I absolutely was not.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think
because you were coming up and kind of playing those warehouse parties at our place, so they were kind of ravey.
Yeah, I mean, I think
what is a rave?
Do you know what? It's really well.
I just thought because it's such a prime bit of history there with like Obi-Wan and all those drum and bass boys and stuff.
And a lot of them are good mates, But that was not my trajectory, but I think that's hopefully maybe a little bit interesting.
Well, totally, because it's a given at that point. I was expecting you were going to say yes. So, what was your entry point to like turntables and playing music and so on?
Well, it was actually, first and foremost, I was like a music nerd from a young age. So I used to just go and hang out at places after school because I went to a posh school on the nice side of town, and then we were still living on the east side of town.
Yeah.
So I had to sort of get a bus sometimes and go through the square. And if I had a bit of time to kill, I would go and hang out usually in a place called Radar Records, which oddly didn't really do records. It was more CDs and stuff. But this is probably early kind of 90s.
Oh, wow, you would have been young, because early 90s, early teens.
Yeah, early teens.
Yeah.
So I was that annoying kid in a school uniform who would kind of go and pester them and listen to things. And because of the price of, this is for younger listeners.
For younger listeners, an esoteric import CD would set you back 50 clams or something like that. Yeah, a regular CD was about $30.
Yeah, recommended retail is normally anywhere from kind of $33.95 to up to $35.
Yeah.
Imports $40, something like that. So, point being, as a school kid, is like, I probably got pocket money now and then, but you wouldn't be buying things every week. So it was really important. And what I've realised in hindsight is it was actually the start of this kind of research thing, which I think is a big part of anyone who wants to go deep on DJing, rather than just...
So even at that age, you'd be reading liner notes for players and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Is that any kind of family lineage there? Have you got a parent like that? Or?
Do you know what? My middle brother, Dave...
Are you youngest, are you?
I'm the youngest of three, yeah. And there's a bit of an age gap. So Dave's 6 years older than me, and Steve, my eldest brother, is 10 years older than me. And they were both into music, but Dave was... I think I picked up a lot of my sort of nerdiness and obsessiveness off him, but he was really into indie stuff.
Yeah.
So he was like, he had a subscription to the NME, for example.
Yeah.
So I'd kind of read that.
Air freighted.
Yeah, air freighted. It had the little airplane on it, the little orange airplane, and he would get that. And I was into a lot of that because, you kind of soak up the influences of people who are around you. And so the actual first CD I think I got was the Happy Mondays, Pills, Thrills and Bellyaches at age 12.
Yeah.
And it completely lost on me, like, oh, they must have eaten too many sweets. You know, like, oh yeah, you don't want to get a bellyache.
No,
too many
sugar.
sweets.
It's terrible. It's terrible. It's pretty the corn syrup epidemic. And that aside, that's quite. Is challenging the right word? It's not. Yeah, it's quite out there listening for a 12-year-old.
Well, I mean, I think, and this might be something with kids who grow up with older siblings. I was probably quite conscious of wanting to, rather than, I had a cousin who was close to me in age, Tim, who was probably more into the pop music of the day, like New Kids on the Block and stuff like that. But that to me was just, it was not. I mean, there was nothing in that music for me, and it was also deeply uncool. Yeah. Even to me at that age, I was like, that is so uncool, man. Yeah. Like, even at that point, I'd kind of worked out that there was, there was styles that were kind of cool. And, like I'd look at these indie kind of Manchester groups like the Stone Roses. Yeah. Even at that young age, I'd be like, man, those guys look cool.
Yeah. Like, I had an interesting one. Now you think it got me reflecting on that age. Like I definitely went through a metal thing in my teenage years. I still like good, heavy music now. Yeah. But I always had this kind of funk, black soul, hip hop thing as well, and I think it's on account of actually now I've reflected on one uncle's music taste, but also just where I grew up. I just grew up around loads of brown people. It was the area that I grew up in, and then also a record shop owner. People you would have heard people talking about the Soul Mine. This guy Tony, who I've actually reacquainted with on Facebook. It's sort of like I knew him in my teenage years. So having a beer with him as an adult was quite sort of cool. Because he was just a great guy in our neighbourhood, and he actually fed a lot of Kilburnie and Lyall Bay, or actually the whole of eastern suburbs in Wellington, with not only the pop they wanted, but he was importing stuff anyway. But anyway, so he sold me, while I'm getting into Guns N' Roses for the first time or whatever, he sold me Soul to Soul Club Classics volume.
Oh, that's great!
Right, on cassette tape.
Yeah.
And I got
so
home.
He was
like,
kind of.
That's quite sophisticated, smooth club music for an 11-year-old or 12-year-old to be listening to.
Right.
He also sold me Ice-T's The Iceberg. I got home. I'm like, this is too heavy. This is too hard for me. Or like something about a torch inserted somewhere and da 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 da. But at least he was trying to like give me the full palette,
And that's like I think that's.
Shouts to Tony from the Soul Mine.
Mate, but, like, even thinking back, and there's, slightly jumping forward to, going to these record stores, there's guys like Tim Beard, who's, like, a really good friend now. Yeah. He was at Galaxy Records, and, the kind of knowledge that those guys would pass on is, like, it was so critical, man, and it was just like, if you trusted these guys as being the kind of gatekeepers or whatever, and it was like that was how we got our knowledge at that time.
Totally. And
also reading liner notes, being a nerd, and getting sort of I guess tips from people whose tastes that you revered or whatever.
That's right, their tastes, and then when I started buying a lot of essentially DJ vinyl, their tastes plus the recommendations of whoever was sending the stuff out from London or wherever it was. So you're really relying on those two or three people when you're the end. I remember when I first started doing that, like late teens, like I never even considered that there was a much wider range of the 12s I was buying, and it was just what the shop kind of got on in. But, that's how the shops survive, isn't it? Because they get good music. And do you think, and I'm not one of these, the old days were better? I often ponder with guests of a certain age, because we're an interesting age, I reckon. Like, I think I said this to you before the other day in your office. Like, we live in the pre kind of full digital world.
Yeah.
So we're kind of adept in both, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So do you reckon the same thing happens online now? There's kind of like online mentors and gurus. And
I think so. Yeah. I mean, and it's
because I know people like Dan are on sites where people are quite supportive and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think however you're going to absorb information, like probably. I'm thinking, there's a student I've got at the moment who's a serious digger already, and he's only just out of high school.
Yeah.
Shout to Leo Casey Wabi. Keep an eye out for him. He's a great little DJ as well. He's going to do some good stuff. But he's, the way that he's digging is, it's a sort of online thing. And I've heard him playing music, and I'm like, man, where'd you get that? And he's like, I'm friends with this guy who sent it to me and da-da-da. And it's like, so basically they're doing the same thing that we were doing, but it just, it doesn't require taking a bus somewhere and physically being somewhere.
But I think the other side, the huge advantage now, again, stating the obvious, is from the information side of thing, analogous to when I said to you about reading liner notes and stuff, like you can craft a whole pretty deep knowledge of let's say, hip-hop or whatever, and only, a few nights of reading the right places. Like, it took me... I wasn't sort of consciously trying to build up knowledge. I ended up with quite a good knowledge of different genres just by being around stuff and you know what I mean? Like it's all there now.
Absolutely.
And I think that's amazing, eh? Like
I think the danger is, and I
remember at a DJ meeting at Active once, which late 90s. It probably seems like freaking ages ago to some people of a certain age, but someone had a videotape of a DMC champs. It was like we all crowded round and watched it at the that sort of those kind of music lovers in a room, that goes to show you the level of what was available around.
And I've heard similar stories from Manuel Bundy and people like that, the similar kind of thing. But jumping back to I wasn't a raver.
I wasn't a raver.
I was not a raver, but I when I started, I was doing the pause button tape thing at school, and I was the kind of, I guess I was the guy amongst my kind of social group where I had more music than most people even at that point, and I was pushy, I guess, about trying to I guess that kind of, it's a thing that DJs need to have, where you need to for me, I feel like you need to strongly believe that the music that you're into is really worth hearing, and people need to know about it. And in hindsight, that's what I was already at that stage. So I'd make tapes for people and give it to them, and be like, man, you got to check this out, and and then once I got to uni, I was hanging out with a group of musicians who were in a band called Solar. Isaac Iseli, Dave Wright, who ended up doing Electric Wire Hustle, Kurt Dyer, who I mentioned earlier on, Johnny Lawrence.
I didn't know all those. I knew Isaac was in. I didn't know there was such a roll call in Solar.
No, it was big. Right. And even Nick Hart was the first drummer, who's the Shocking Pinks, who was signed to DFA and stuff. So a really, not that any of us knew that at the time, but I think that there was this sort of commonality of, there probably was a lot of rave stuff going on, but for a sort of ragtag bunch of dudes who were more interested in soul, jazz-based music, it was kind of like, okay, well, let's see what happens. And I remember the first few gigs, I used to borrow a suitcase from my mum and dad and take my turntables along in that.
Awesome.
And just
1200s or just some...
I bought 1200s with my student loan.
Yeah. So you found right. Good on you. I've talked to a few people about what they did with their student loan. Chris Chetland built the beginning of Cog Studios with 3 student loans. Yeah, perfect. A lot of people pissed them up a wall when they used to pay that huge amount of money.
I did a little bit, of course, but
so that was what I was trying to get to. That's the vital link: is who turned you on? Because you've got to see somewhere. The 2 turntables in a mixer thing. It wasn't in the pop culture, even in the 90s, in a huge way.
No.
So who turned you on to the idea of spending probably $2,000 at the time on record players?
Yeah, I think I've got to give it. I always. Whenever anyone asks me this, I sort of talk... there was really pivotal guys in Christchurch, your Greg Churchills and people like that,
right.
And then all the rave kind of scene that you mentioned as well. But because I wasn't plugged into that, it was a little bit off my radar.
Yeah.
So the first time I really saw a DJ doing something that I could relate to was when Manuel Bundy actually came down and did a show with Nathan Haynes that I went to. And I remember it was actually not so much when Nathan was playing live, but it was before and after. And I remember him just playing tracks that I'd either heard or maybe had on CD and things like that.
But his musicality is so nuts that they're just perfect mixes.
And I just remember thinking, wow, this guy's DJing like the music that we all really like. Why don't we hear music like this when we go out normally?
Because you're in Christchurch in the 90s.
Exactly. So, and that, I don't mean that to be offensive to anyone.
No, even those guys would joke about that as well.
Yeah, and
it was a hard. I didn't even know there was a hardcore scene in New Zealand until I went to the Gathering, and it's like the whole lineup's all
yeah. So
from your home city.
So it was very much. It was kind of
Wellington held down the Deep House.
Yeah. They were ahead of their time. They were cool, man. But So in that way, it was kind of needs must. Like in the way that sometimes these things are. It wasn't like I didn't have like this sort of Road to Damascus moment where it was like, become a DJ. It was just like, oh, well, you know, I like that music. And if someone like that, I mean, not that I kind of didn't understand the technicalities of it. And I could not mix a drink for the first couple of years that I played. And I wasn't really interested in that. It was more like, let's try and piece things together in an interesting way. And, you know.
I kind of did, I don't know if Road to Damascus, but, you know, sort of that seeing someone and going, oh, that's what they're doing. And I don't know, just me growing up, the number of things, I was like, that really appeals to me for some reason. Yeah. That like putting stuff together and making something new.
Do you know what?
And at the time I wasn't very good. Like I'd been in a band and I just was probably better as someone doing my own thing than trying to get stuff. I've got better in groups as I've got older, but it was just like, to me it was like I can create on my own. Yeah,
you can be a lone wolf and kind of be weird on your own.
It's a bit heavy, but yeah.
Yeah, lone wolf sounds...
I think that's what they call the Oklahoma Bomber.
Sorry, man.
Where were we?
Yeah, but, you know, like I think the thing that really did appeal to me and I found completely ludicrous at the time was that someone would pay you money to play music that you liked. And what I really like is that I still feel like I'm getting away with that 20 years later. Like it still feels like I'm pulling a scam on someone that you could pay me money to turn up and play.
Did you hear that, bookers and promoters? Drop the price.
But you know what I mean? Like, especially when you've come from working shitty jobs. I mean, dude, some of the jobs I was doing around that time, I was a vacuum cleaner salesman.
Oh, look, I was, it was...
I was a glassy at a pub.
I've done that. You know, I had a great part-time job for what it was. You know, I was doing hotel portering around that age. But, you know, the money, I think that was about, you know, $8.50 an hour back then, which was actually quite good money for a youth. And then suddenly it's like, come and play at La Luna, wherever it was, and it was $25 an hour, which even then was under market. But to me was like, what?
Crazy, right?
What? You know, and it's handed to you,
Yeah, and it's quite a...
But then you used to go and buy lots and lots of music with it, which you kind of maybe don't do as much now.
Well, that's the thing.
I'm sure you do, but...
that's the thing. I mean, I
think that was the unwritten understanding, that like the joke was the bartender doesn't bring the top shelf to work. So, you bring your...
Exactly. You've got. You did have to put a lot of that back into your, your habit, I guess.
But then it's also a lot of responsibility. Like if someone's getting you in, particularly, so not parties and specialist stuff like you do a lot of now, but if you're just being hired to like keep a room humming for the night, you're actually responsible for whether or not the night. Well, you're obviously good other stuff and stuff as well, but you're holding a vibe for a business and trying to keep people in there and having a good time. You know.
Yeah.
And that's no $8 an hour.
Yeah, and I mean, even at that age, I mean, I don't know whether I was just being naive, but I sort of always thought, I remembered only wanting to do it really on my own terms, in terms of like, I didn't want to play music that I didn't like. Yeah. And I think I always say that to any students I have. I'm like, don't get sucked into some, commercial bullshit. If you do that like that, and that's your thing, and that's what you're about, brilliant. But if you're actually into something else and you...
Well, that's like, I call them like mobile DJs, and that's, people make a career out of that and da-da-da, but you're right, there's some people who can and some people who can't. I dabbled in that for a little bit as a teenager, and it might sound cheesy or whatever, but even then I was like, I can't do this. This is depressing. And you know what it was for me? It was mainly just the energy with people coming up to you and stuff. It's just a totally different thing. Yeah. It's like demanding this, demanding that. Yeah. High levels of intoxication.
Yeah.
The drunk uncle of the 21st. I'm like, I can't. This is like, and the people I know who can do it on that interpersonal level, I actually really respect that. Like, I'm not built to do that. But, I've got...
Oh, absolutely.
Older guy from Wellington, Aki, who still does shows like that. He's really good and polite and happy and jovial. And I'm like, get out of my face.
I know, you're either built for it or you're not. Yeah, I'm the same. I've got a lot of admiration for people who can do that, but it's just not... It's not the way that I'm wired up, and, and that's fine, but I think you kind of can't have it both ways. No. You can't do that stuff and be like, well, actually, I'm an artist. Yeah. And da-da-da. It's like you have to pick your road, and, if you want to go this kind of, underground route or whatever, then, it's hard, man.
So you moved to, by the way, just quickly, we won't dwell on this too long, but you were coming up to... Maybe I met you a couple of times in Wellington. You came up to play at parties being put on at
Yep.
my place because you knew John Saunders.
I met John Saunders.
Where's he gone?
I've no
I've
idea.
heard rumours he's on the North Shore, all sorts.
Really?
Good
Yeah.
parties.
Oh, man.
I couldn't live in a place like that anymore, though, the Rave Cave.
A wonderful technical DJ, John.
Never owned turntables, had just an intuitive, he had a particular sound,
Yeah.
like I was talking about with another guest that Derek May kind of has with
he was
how he
very,
moves.
very, I'm trying to find the right words for him. Technical, but very funky, very energetic.
Stole records from my room.
Oh, dear. Yeah, I mean,
We
I've
were
heard
young.
sort of like...
Anyway, so you moved to Auckland in 01.
Yeah, 2000, actually.
Was that music focused or just a sea change in general, or...
It was love, actually.
Ah.
Yeah, love, actually. no, I fell in love with my wife, yeah. And I just sort of, not that I'll get into a big soppy story about it, but, aside from that, I think the time was right for me to make a move. But definitely the push for it was from meeting Sonia, who's now my wife, and just being like, oh my God.
She from Auckland?
No, she's from Christchurch, but she had moved up here as well.
Yeah.
I didn't really know her. Then I met her when I came up to play at a few parties and sort of took a bit of a shine to her. Nothing happened. Got back on the plane to Christchurch and was like, holy shit, I'm leaving. I'm out of here. I'm going to go and chase this girl.
I met her at Soulfest, and I always like it when I meet completely new people and they're totally friendly and open and cool and stuff, and it's like, yeah. Oh, she's a good egg, bro.
And I think I knew, this weird moment where
I don't like that social, it's cool. Yeah.
No, she's I mean, God, incredibly supportive, and now we've got kids together and stuff. But I think even at the young age of whatever I was then, like 21, I remember sort of thinking, wow, okay, I feel like something was driving me to be like, okay, I need to chase this girl. If it doesn't work out, that's okay as well. But I don't want to be the old man kind of on my porch, like, I remember that girl Sonia.
But hang on, had you already dated, or were you just chasing someone you just met?
Her. Yeah. Well,
really?
no, I knew her as a friend. And I'd sort of.
So you just moved cities.
Knock on the door. Hello.
Really
oh yeah. It's a bit creepy.
That's awesome.
No, she knew I was coming back, and I think there was a kind of unspoken understanding that she knew why I was moving up, and not in a creepy way, but just like I think there was.
Oh, and I think there is that if you got that connect with someone, the both of you, it's like I get it. Yeah, I get it.
So that was the spur. It wasn't a real career thing, but it did turn out to be the right time to move up. I guess I landed on my feet in terms of, house was really massive at the time, so I probably moved more into that scene, but definitely also stayed in the kind of more jazzy sort of scene with Kuja Lounge and places like that.
Good time for all of that, Kyan's crew and stuff. You did the academy 2 years after I did, eh? Where was Red Bull Academy in 2002?
It was in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Mine was in Dublin, which was great. But hello, Sao Paulo.
Yeah.
The year in between, there's a story there. You know where it was in 2001,
I do, yeah. It was in New York during
September 11.
Yeah.
So,
and, poor old Jason Harding was there, and I remember talking with him about it. That was the first time I'd applied for it.
Didn't it just stop it for that year? Sure,
they shut it down, and then they rescheduled to London a few months later, I feel like. But yeah, it was interesting because I applied for the Rebel Music Academy, the one that was in New York.
Yeah.
And I felt like I'd done a good job, and I was like, weird, like, it's so stupid, but in hindsight I felt confident about it. I was like, but, and then I missed out, and I was like, oh man, there's must be thousands or hundreds of people that apply, so why would I get in? And that changed my approach. And when the Brazilian one came out, I was like, okay, I'll go again. No expectations. I'll just try and put together what I'm into. And it was at the time where I was starting to, I guess, get into broken beat and stuff like that. So sort of West London sound.
Yeah, which Dan totally turned me on to.
Yeah, that's
right. Your third shout out this podcast, Dan. Yep.
Big shout out to Dan. I mean, me and him go way back. One of my first gigs was actually one of his birthday parties.
He and I met at, we were both doing pay per hour hospo work in Melbourne, 2002, 3-ish.
Yeah.
Someone said, there's another Kiwi here, and I thought I better do the right thing. I said, did you watch the rugby the other night? He goes, I don't watch rugby. and then about 10 minutes later we were talking about
we were
talking about the most obscure dance music.
Oh, he's serious music head. I mean, big up, Dan.
But we just instantly connected and hung out a lot over that period of time. It was actually quite emotional when he left Melbourne, man. Because we just forged this quite full-on friendship quite quickly.
Oh no, he's a great dude. So the Red Bull thing was, Broken Beat was coming out, and I got lucky, I guess. I sort of put on a mixture of stuff, and I finished with a George Duke track called Brazilian Love Affair. Because I was like, man, if someone's still listening by this stage, they might think this is corny or they might love it. And I actually found out from a guy called Fergus, who was he was the actual guy who listened to my tape. And it just so happened that he was really into that Broken Beat sound.
Nice.
And he thought it was a cheeky kind of thing. He was like, it's kind of corny but funny.
For those who don't know, I don't know about your year, Chris, but I think only one person had been before 2000. It might have been Chelsea, and she sort of came back and ambassaded a bit through Red Bull, and they ended up with the situation where that year they didn't have any Australians on the table in the finals. It might have been that it wasn't promoted there, or whatever. It doesn't matter. But they ended up, from memory, I mean, God, it's nearly 20 years ago.
Know, it's crazy.
They ended up with, from a small nation, New Zealand, 4 million people at the time, or whatever, something like 9 on the absolute shortlist. They've got 2 people from the UK. That they end up with 9, and I think they culled us down to 6 or 7 from memory.
That's really interesting because
Flick, Edmund Skillery, call herself, myself, Cuffy, Philippa, that's 5. Glenn Davison, who's now like Homebrew's DJ and stuff, that's 6. Jamie Robertson, who's the house DJ guy who lives in London, that's 7. So they had 4 of us in one block and 3 in the other, and a lot of these much bigger nations, they had one person or whatever.
No, you're right. I mean, New Zealand, like around that time, we were really. I think it's probably in part because they were just starting out, so it probably didn't quite have the same. It's not the same juggernaut that it is now.
Oh, totally. I wouldn't get in now. You wouldn't get in based on being just a DJ now.
I mean,
the name's actually changed. It was called the DJ Academy.
Now
it's the Music
Academy. It was very much. And
I
think when I went in 2002, it was just starting to edge out of that. So the vast majority of people were still DJs, but you were just starting to get that people moving into production. And I mean, even for me, by that time, I'd bought an MPC, and I think
that must have been so inspiring. Going just after you'd bought that,
amazing. But I mean, in hindsight, it was like, in those. I mean, again, it's funny. Like when I talk to students about this, they're just like, you can just see the wonder in their eye. It's like it was very rare. It doesn't
seem like that long ago
for people to even have a computer. Like I didn't have a computer. If I needed to check my email, I went to the internet cafe, or I had an MPC, but I didn't have a computer. The first record I made was with 2 great mates of mine, Isaac Osili and Lucas Farry, under the name This Information. And Lucas was like the guy who had the computer and had Pro Tools, and he was like the brain of the operation. And Isaac and I would sit there, and I did some drums on the MPC, and then we'd sit there and tell him what to do. It was like no idea of like people sitting around with laptops and doing stuff. So
I had a student sitting in my class mains the other day banging out a hit on a cell phone app. Just had great timing, and he was sitting there like just doing the funkiest jam on this little like. So the Red Bull Academy, you where were we with that? It was a long time ago. A bunch of Kiwis.
Actually, bang on 15 years. November 2002. That's when it was.
No, it was an amazing experience. It was the first time for me that I'd done. I mean, I had only travelled to Australia, so even just jumping on a long haul flight was new.
The brilliant thing about Brazil, and this, like, I remember this recently. Red Bull. Big ups to Red Bull New Zealand because, Grace Boyle, there's a bunch of people who've always been really, and they sort of treated you like family after you did that. They were quite supportive, even if you were doing oddball kind of projects. They'd try and help out where they could. They gave me a per diem, daily allowance while I was there.
Really?
And it was because of the way the currency was then. I think I actually came back with money because it was so cheap. It was like, and I was even buying records, like I was buying Brazilian music. And
we didn't have that, but hey, no complaints. They had to buy all our flights last minute. And I remember looking at the cost of my return flight that Red Bull footed, 2000, it was like $3.5K or something. But that's funny you say that the support on the way back. It was so new when we went. They actually, from what I've heard, I don't know if this is true, they changed the rules a little because Red Bull New Zealand has invested at the end of the day in us, and I probably didn't think about this at the time when there was no rules or whatever. I didn't come back. Flick didn't come back.
Wow.
Edmund Skillery didn't come back.
Wow.
There was a bunch of us that's like, this is our ticket to our OE.
Yeah.
So
just stayed.
Yeah, and I tried to link with Red Bull Australia when I came back because I ended up living in Melbourne for 6 years.
Yeah.
And it just totally went over their head because Red Bull Australia was very sport focused then.
Right, yeah. And they've changed it. And actually,
New Zealand was very pioneering with the music side of Red Bull.
And I mean, Red Bull, RBMA in Australia now is doing some incredible things.
Yeah, no, the guy in Melbourne just had no concept of what I was talking about when I was there.
Yeah.
Last thing with that is, I was thinking with all those numbers of people ending up from New Zealand and stuff, again, the time it was...
back in the sepia tone days.
Part of it was they were looking, because we're on the map a lot more in the kind of music we're into now, but back then it was like, imagine them looking at a map in the office in Dublin and going, down there.
Yeah.
Like, how do they even,
Yeah, it's quite bizarre, isn't it? I mean, I think there was Emma Jean, who was on the same as me. She ended up working for them.
She's still the voice. Like, I recognise the voice. She's still the voice of Red Bull Radio.
Yes, yeah, and I think going to what you're saying, I think there was a lot of people that they met that they really liked as well.
Yeah,
in terms of just that classic Kiwi kind of stereotype where you quite like, g'day, mate, and you're friendly.
Well, like Jason, who you spoke of, I don't think was ever a student. He was just an ambassador.
He was like the ambassador,
and a lot of people, I think Nick D forged a long-term relationship with them. Let's not say, we've just given Red Bull a lot of promo. Shouts to Hallertau and Dave. Dave sends me beer. Dave listened to the podcast and started sending me beer. This is episode 50. Thank you for your support, Dave. I tell you what, Hallertau, I jest, but that's analogous as a company. They actually support a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, so 5 years on the radio with Recluse, and it was actually one of my highlights of the radio week. Listening to you guys, I didn't realise it was you for many years because I was back in New Zealand. I didn't know you changed your name. Yeah. I actually thought it was a guy called Sam Mulmoney because that's how I remembered his voice sounding. But anyway, was it sad to give that up? Was that a good run? 5 years on the radio?
I think at the time it was the right time to stop.
So it wasn't the changes at George; it was just you guys stopping.
No, and it was quite weird because in hindsight, people are so ready to get outraged about stuff. And I remember at the time, people presumed that we'd been fired.
Yeah,
and we were like, no, we just quit.
Yeah, you hit it and quit it.
We hit it and quit it, just exactly like the name said.
Yeah.
And it was, it was very much Matt's decision in terms of he was so into the show being of a certain standard in terms of he wasn't interested in going up and just treading water week to week. It needed to be of a really high standard.
So you'd actually, because you're right, I'm more often guilty of this than not, just grabbing a bunch of tunes.
Yeah, he
turning
did
the mic
not
on.
want that.
Yeah.
And I mean, we had kind of unwritten rules around music policy and repetition and things like that. So it was you would not. I think the max that we would play, like say a new record or an old record, actually would be 2 times. And if it got to like the 3rd time, one of us would be like, "Hey, we've overdone it." Like this is.
Whoa, buddy, you're selling out here. Come on,
come on. But not so much that. It was more just like there's so much music.
So much music. Yeah.
That new stuff. We'd want to keep it moving. We'd always kind of try and get this balance of like. The weird old shit that influenced us, coupled with brand new stuff.
But you were good hosts too. Like there's been any number of DJs over the years. I think it just their selections and blah 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 is brilliant. But to be good hosts as well, it was a fun show.
Yeah,
I still remember the Booker Prize.
And the Booker Prize. We would come up with these ridiculous things, and
it wasn't ridiculous. I was like, that's perfect.
Yeah, the Booker Prize.
I can't remember what it was.
Well, the Booker Prize was just whatever I felt like on the week. Like if I felt like being nice, or a sports team had played particularly well, or something. It was just some bullshit, really. But it was more just to kind of have these, I guess, touchstones that we would kind of come back to.
Yeah, you got to have your features.
We also had this thing called rough cuts that we would do, and we would do like a jingle like by ourselves. ourselves like just singing this Rough Cut song, like, and then just go Rough Cuts. And Rough Cuts was meant to be us kind of playing whatever we might be working on at the time, like whether it was a new Recluse record or a Frank Booker thing or whatever. We would play it and kind of try and garner some feedback. And the idea was to actually not be all like, hey man, you're awesome, I love your shit. It would more often be like, oh, that's actually a bit average.
Would you critique each other's on air?
Oh, totally.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And we actually, I think one of the great things we did, we had an air raid siren for whenever someone cocked up a mix.
I do remember that, yeah.
And it got quite brutal and competitive, and there were some arguments about it.
You know what makes it funny about that is normally those air raid sirens are totally played out for when things are going on.
Yeah. No, ours was definitely if someone had mucked up.
Right.
And there would be often arguments on air. Like, I remember Matt giving me an air raid when I just sort of dropped a beat for like half a bar, and I was like... I got on the mic. I was like, "Nah, man, that's some bullshit. Like, that's like that's just me. That's just mixing, man. Like, what the hell is that?" And then, like, he would do the same if he felt I was being harsh. The funniest one, though, and I shouldn't really say this on air, but why not? If we had a guest up to do a mix, it was always this kind of like, "Oh, do we air raid them?" Because, like, with us, we know that it's like the thing, but it's like
I think if they're in the fold, you air raid them.
You don't want to bum them out and be like, "Man, you suck."
I think it was like that kid you speak of at Mains. If you get like, imagine the guy you just shouted out to, you get him up. Yeah. I think if it's someone in the fold.
But I think that so we had Jazzy J come up.
Oh no, you can't air raid him.
Yeah, and he cocked up, and I remember being like, my hand hovered over it, and I was like. And Matt actually wasn't there. Weirdly, Matt was in the States, and my hand hovered over it, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to be a diplomat, and I'm going to let it slide. Only because you're one of the godfathers.
But you know what would have been real funny is, because the listeners already know about it, if you'd done it and then just not spoken of it. Like, so the listeners hear it and they go, yep.
Yeah, man.
And then that's the way you could have got away with it.
But, I mean, I guess the idea was, like, the show was always meant to be quite ragtag in terms of... I feel like that was actually a good side of it, because it wasn't meant to be this super slick, like, hey, check us out. Well, but you were planning as well. It was planned chaos, which is entertainment, good entertainment a lot of the time. Yeah.
And you guys picked up Moody Man around then. That was fun.
That was a
Melbourne
good gig.
And saw him as well.
I mean, we kind of fell into doing parties, and we were always hilariously crap promoters, just in terms of we really had no business being promoters, and I'm okay with that. Like, it's not, it's never something I've done loads of parties.
Oh, it looked like you got the room. Really... The room was there was definitely people there, man.
Oh, we did. We had some great parties. We had good parties with him, with Con. Then we had other ones that were like, actually Dame Funk was an amazing party we did at the old Fu Zen. That was really good. And then we'd have other ones where we just kind of. We'd get someone who might be a friend, or and it was just a bit off people's radar, and no one would turn up.
Moody Man had his house decked out in purple for months after. I wanted to ask you. You're right. You say we talked all the time. I haven't covered nearly half the stuff. I have bullet points, folks. These aren't completely winged. I did want to ask a little bit about production and stuff, because, as I say, you've made yourself quite a name, and your vinyl runs sell out, and et cetera, et cetera. We'll get to that. What's this disco towel thing, man?
Mate, that's again...
Because Danny Lemon has a disco towel as well. I think it's you and him, yeah.
Right. No, there's a few people that probably do. I think it's probably... I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, if I'm playing a party, a lot of the time I'll have a towel over my shoulder. And it really is because I'm a roughly 100 kg... aging gentleman who sweats, and that's fine, and it's weirdly it's become part of the thing where it's like, if the party's going really good, I might swing the towel around and like an idiot, but more often than not, it's just to mop my brow.
So it's not a security blanket.
No,
I'm kidding. So have you,
maybe it is.
So have you you've met Danny Lemon over the years, surely?
Lemon, do you know what? It's really funny because I've got the utmost respect for Danny, and I talk to him a lot online, but we've only actually met in person a handful of times.
Well, I've actually still bring this up with Danny with time to time when I see him, because my enduring memory of him was at Stacey Pullen sometime in the 90s, party going off, towel around his neck. Kill us with it, Stacey! Fucking kill us with it! It was just such a Danny moment.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
No, so there's no kind of, gimmick behind it. It's just I'm a sweaty man.
Yeah,
especially when I DJ and I'm dancing, and and I think it's good. You want to show people. Maybe the point behind it is to show people that I'm actually up there doing something, playing records, working, sweating to try and make you dance.
Yeah. The production thing. So you've already alluded that it kind of happened early 2000s, and the tunes of yours I've heard. I haven't heard everything, but the ones I've heard I really like. And when I was doing shows on bass, a couple of them I probably actually played more than 3 times with your 3-time rule.
That's okay.
But I was thinking today, from sort of like idea to finished tune to like labels and so on, in this day and age, like how do you even make the noise you have in just such a, you know what I mean? Like 15 years later, I probably would have been even more all over someone like yours music, but there's just so much of everything around now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
How do you have like a almost a business plan side of it, or are you just like it's organic,
It's reasonably organic. I mean, I think that I've always tried to team up with labels who have got a similar idea to what I have in terms of A, the music fits, but B, they're good people to deal with, and they're not not doing some bullshit or music that I wouldn't play. Like that's a big part of it. It's got to be like, if it's going to come out on a label, I need to feel like the other stuff that's on the label isn't a million miles from what I'm doing.
So you've got that group support to begin with. The label's known for what it does.
Yeah.
So you're going in with a recognised kind of...
Yeah, so there's that. I mean, in terms of... I don't really have a plan behind it. I think... a lot of it's been organic. I think I've been really lucky with just probably getting the timing just about right in terms of, coming up on a lot of the edit stuff. I mean, before that, I didn't just sort of drop out of the sky, like doing production. I was doing production for people like Nathan Haynes, like did all the drum programming for him.
I thought you said you started early 2000s.
I did, But what I was going to say is there was a long period of kind of collaborating with people, and then the Booker stuff actually came out of just wanting to do stuff on my own. I was going to say be a lone wolf, but it's, oh man, I feel like making something where it's just really sample based and something that is just some pure DJ shit that I would like to play. And the main thing that I thought at that time that I kind of still try and do is just step back as I'm working on stuff and think, what would I think of this if I was flicking through it, listening to it at a record shop?
Yeah.
And that's really the only kind of rule I have. I'm like, would I like this?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty brutal about it. A lot of the times I'll be like, nah, it's shit, I'll chuck it away.
Yeah.
Or, no, it's good. I think I'd buy that, you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of came about like that.
So there's the edits, and then there's the EPs of, I guess, more, what would you call it, original cuts?
Original kind of house flavoured stuff, but I mean, it's always sort of rooted in sample-based music.
You had some slower, more broken stuff, because I was trying to think, have I got it written here? This is purely for my own...
No, that's all good.
My own sanity. Oh... Yeah, I looked on Discogs, and the EP that I was running quite a lot on my show, the Fallout EP, wasn't on your Discogs list. Has it got a different name?
No, it might just be an anomaly. Like Fallout was a Sleazy Beats release, I think.
Okay.
But you're right.
Rest easy, everyone. Rest easy tonight.
No, I think I know the cut you mean. There's like a slower kind of beatdown thing.
Yeah, I used to run both sides, but
it's called Points, and it sampled the Pointer Sisters, I think.
Yeah. Hey, that's what I realised. You realise that's when you know you're making it, bro. When you've got an entry on who sampled, you've got one on.
Really?
Yeah, you've got one. Right? Some nerds.
Wow.
Have a look later today. It's just
clearly got way too much time.
One of your cuts. Excuse me. And you've hooked up with... So when I was putting on tiny little parties in Melbourne, I can't even remember how, but some Kiwi guy approached me from the crowd, I think. His name was Jeremy. And he turns out to be involved now with something called Crown Ruler.
Yeah.
Anyway, point is, I booked him. We did a couple of parties together. And I just kind of wanted to know, what is Crown Ruler? Because I get that Jeremy's finding all these totally mad, lost records from yesteryear, but then you seem to have some sort... Do they book people as well? Like your agents in Australia?
Yes, that's right. So Crown Ruler was actually started by Jamie Bennett, who's like he's the RBMA guy in Australia as well. So he's a heavyweight guy, amazing record collector, great DJ, who was doing a lot of gigs and whatnot, and eventually started I mean, I don't know the complete history.
Yeah,
so, but you know,
just more meaning. Is it a full-time thing they do, or is it just?
It is. I mean, they do some massive festivals now. They do a thing called Freedom Time, which is like a New Year's Day event. They've got people like Larry Heard playing
they put on those big New Year's. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're doing stuff like that. They do bookings for a lot of kind of Australian artists, as well as myself and Julian Dine and Lord Echo in Australia. So, I mean, God, I've got to give a big shout out to Jamie and Laura and Jeremy as well.
Jeremy finds obscure Nigerian funk records, and
Jeremy kind of runs the label and the web store, where they're selling crazy rare records.
I'd love to know where he even finds that stuff. Who knows?
He's a serious digger, man.
I wonder if he's travelled over them side of the world.
I'm not sure. Yeah,
it's amazing.
But I mean, in terms of, I know for myself and Julian and Mike, Lord Echo as well, they've been huge because the scene in Australia is so vibrant. It actually keeps me sane going there to play. Which is
amazing, because when I think there's a big influence of Kiwi DJs there over the years, as well as Aussie years changing. Because when I first moved there in the early 2000s, it was kind of a like mainstreamy nightclubby thing that most or a lot of people were doing, or like breaks, but a different kind of breaks than would go down here, and everything's got a bit slinkier and funkier, as well as more kind of just the reggae scene's got bigger. A whole lot of stuff analogous to here has sort of popped off wider since a bunch of Kiwis into that stuff moved over there. I don't know if we can take full credit.
I don't know if we can take credit,
but we can take a part of credit for
it. I think we're sort of like the cousins, aren't we? So there's probably been some influence there. But I know, from what I've seen in the last few years, there's people like Jamie and the Crown Ruler crew who are really pushing things along, and I mean, it's something to aspire to for New Zealand, I think, because I feel like I don't think this is a revelation, but I think they've left us behind in terms of club culture and in terms of the real, what I take as true club culture, like underground stuff, breaking new artists, doing interesting off-the-wall kind of stuff, as opposed to just,
Well, Melbourne, when I go back, it's like, that's right, it's a city that likes to have fun,
Yeah.
And actually, I was thinking, like, Melbourne, if Melbourne was a sort of a human, it's kind of in its 20s, early 30s. I think it feels like Auckland's kind of in its 50s, maybe.
I was say 80s. No, that's not right. I mean, there's still, man, I mean, there's great. I don't mean that to say.
Oh, it's all right. It's all good. Don't have to issue disclaimers.
No.
You've already dissed Prince. I mean,
yeah, I know. I'm already fucked. So, it's all good.
Yeah. And so, how's teaching been, man? That must have been a bit of a life. It's something you hadn't done before, eh? So, teaching at Mains, you run their DJ course. Is that right?
It's called a Certificate in DJ and Electronic Music Production.
It's
so
1
DJ
year?
MP. It's 1 year cert, and next year we're starting diploma at level 5 as well. So that's pretty cool. I honestly can say, hand on heart, I never thought I would be involved in education.
Dude, I'm right with you. I never thought I'd go back to uni.
Yeah.
I never thought any of that.
The irony's not lost on me that I'm now sort of, sitting in these, bureaucratic meetings and talking to NZQA about stuff and, and this whole other world. But it's been really pretty amazing as well.
It sounds cheesy, but I've found it good for my personal growth. I've learned a whole lot, and I just approached. I don't know. I didn't realise I wasn't giving as much back. I probably thought I was, but I'm like, well, this is quite. It's nourishing. Like
it is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
frustrating.
It's frustrating as hell. It's not like it's always running through the meadows
Dead Poet
and having
Society.
jumping up on tables and inspiring people to better futures and stuff. But occasionally you have these sort of victories, and people do really well, whether it's kind of noted that they're doing well or they just move into a field that they want to move into, and that's great. I think what it's really meant for me is that it's forced me into this position where I'm not able to get bitter and twisted and like DJs of a certain age do, where it's like, these kids, they don't bloody know.
Yeah, you're on the shop floor.
Yeah, it's like, nah, man, the kids are all right, mate.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes some of them drive you mad, but in terms of they have the same passion and enthusiasm that you and I would have had at the same age. It's a different era, but
I was going to say, that's what you don't realise is like, so mid-90s for us.
Yeah.
So we're coming as like someone coming from the mid-70s.
Exactly.
I always forget it's 20 years ago.
Exactly.
20 years ago.
Exactly.
shit's changed.
Shit has changed a lot, and it's like, and I think if you realise that ultimately people's kind of intentions are probably much the same. They want to have a good time. They want to share the music that they're into, things like that. Then that's a really good. It kind of keeps you a bit grounded and centered, and it means that you can't get too bitter about stuff. It doesn't mean that I don't moan and kind of think that a lot of new music's crap, because of course it is.
A lot of old music's crap.
Exactly. Yeah. But I always say to them early on, I'm like, you'll find out what I'm into, and that I'm into this like ridiculous sort of hybrid of disco boogie and a bit of house and blah blah blah, and like. Some of you might like it, a lot of you won't, and that is totally fine. I would actually find it quite weird if a lot of you...
Well, even for what they're used to such bombastic production now, it would sound like 100 years old to a lot of them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm meaning?
Totally.
Yeah.
So, once you accept that, and it's like, these kids aren't meant to like the same things we like. No. We're not meant to like what they like a lot of the time. There'll be these crossover moments where you hear something and you're like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Isn't that the whole point of being a teenager? Yeah.
Totally. Why should, exactly. Yeah. Why should it be palatable to... old buggers like us.
So I think this easy. So I think about the eighth guest in a row, it's probably come up. But so I brought the machine over there,
right? Yes.
But I'm going to get.
Have you got the new one? You got the Mark III?
No, Mark II. I'm trying to get into it over summer. But I'm at such an entry level. I haven't even worked out the scene sequence. I've got loops going and stuff.
Yeah.
But how easy is it once you break that seal? If you've produced before, do you think it's pretty intuitive once you get going?
It is. I mean, without going into the uber sort of nerd mode of production and stuff, I think probably the drawback with machine...
Keep facing there.
Oh, sorry.
That's
I'm
right.
Unprofessional, because I'm looking longingly at the machine in the corner.
Yeah, even though he's got 100 of them at work.
Yeah. I think the thing is, it doesn't have the same kind of linear approach that a lot of DAWs Ableton
This is what's very different with the sequencing for me.
Exactly. So you don't have that kind of tape recorder style approach where things get put in a row.
Yeah.
But I can, I'm happy to show you, mate. You pop in.
That's what I was going to ask, is how many weeks do you spend on Ableton as part of that DJ course? Not Ableton, sorry, Machine.
Oh, as a student or
No,
or
when you
me?
are teaching it, don't you teach the Machine for X amount of weeks?
Yeah, we do. We sort of, I think it's usually around the start of semester 2, so the third term we look quite a lot at drum programming and drum machine. So like, I'm from an MPC background, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
So we look at the MPC and these kind of the early ones like the SP 808, 909, things like that. The stuff that we've got at mains are like the TR08, which is like the updated version of the 808. We've got a couple of MPCs.
So you don't do a dedicated machine class?
Oh, we do, but it's not like it's part of a wider course.
I'm just trying to get into whether maybe I just sit in on that. Whether I just sit in on that, since they might let me.
I think like with the diploma thing, we'll probably do it more at level 5. So
Oh, that's interesting you say that, because I thought Ableton was the same in that it had that kind of sequencing and set out rather than...
Same but different.
Yeah. But not that, as you say, blocks of colour in a window, which is what I've done, it's what I teach, it's what I've done 15 years
Exactly. People are used to this left to right approach of like it starts here, ends here, whereas it's a bit more...
I'm going to have you up on that. I think that's the main thing I need to suss, and then all the rest will come to me.
It'll start to come together. I mean, Big shout to Leon.
It's amazing what you get for under $1,000. Even the plugins. You know what's happened this podcast? We've done all these I know. Shout outs to companies.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Well, Leon, I was going to say Leon Dahl at the Rock Shop. I did the product launch for them about a month ago. Yeah. And they very kindly gifted me a Mark III, and it's, oh my God, it's amazing. Like I wish I had more time to use it.
You got that for doing the launch for one night. That's amazing.
I did. So, I mean, I bought a Mark I off them years ago, and when I saw it was coming out, I was like, I've got to upgrade. And he was like, mate, why don't you do this and we can probably, da-da-da. So thank you, Leon. What a great guy.
He's on episode 30-something, folks, I think.
He's a top man.
Hey, we've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes. So just before you go, you've got Scott's memorial tonight. That's sad news. I feel like he's someone I probably should have known through the Traps, because a lot of people I do know him. Yeah. What's planned for tonight?
Yeah, well, tonight we're having a memorial for Scott at Galatos in Auckland. his funeral was last Saturday in Palmerston North, because that's where he sort of grew up, and his family is still based. But, you know, he'd been in Auckland for a long time, and it just had such a massive impact on the music community. And early on, a few of his close friends, we sort of decided, God, we need to organise something to allow people to get together and pay the respects, and, you know, have a dance, have a drink, have a cry, have a laugh,
reminisce,
you know, just reminisce. And, you know, because he was, one of his great things was he was just had his fingers in so many pies, and could kind of bring really, you know, these wide-ranging groups together. So I imagine that's what it'll be like tonight. Yeah,
that's cool. And just even talking to other people at Mains, like, I didn't know that stuff like with the radio station that the students get to use now, he had all this sort of red tape and stuff, and basically built it off his own back. And then I think someone sent the wrong invoice to TPP or whatever, and in the end he just wanted to get it going. So rather than getting all that sorted out, he just paid for the last part of it out of his own pocket. I thought that spoke to the man. You know?
Oh man, I mean, I'm doing a speech tonight. The tribute sort of speech to him, and I guess the theme is generosity, in terms of with his time, generosity of spirit, you know, like just a very selfless guy in terms of what he, you know, and the stories like that come up time and time again in terms of him doing, you know, things like that, and it's just a big loss.
I think before we go, the reason I wanted to bring it up is I sort of wanted to be quite frank, and this has happened, you know, with a friend or two of mine in the last few years. Is, you know, without stating the obvious, like the mental health things, like, you know, people have got to reach out or do whatever they've got to do, because there's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way for things to end for everyone around and for the person, right?
No, that's right. And, you know, it's kind of strange to think, but, you know, this year I actually made it my mission to teach a couple more classes on this very thing, like mental health issues in music.
Oh, I didn't know you guys did that. Well,
Well, no, it was never previously a thing, and I was like, you know what, needs to be addressed, because whether it's talking about mental health or even substance abuse, and you know, the correlation between those things,
or even just living upside down, working night.
And just, you know, it was and it was really good to sort of, I guess, bring these issues up with particularly because a lot of the students I'm teaching are pretty young.
I think that's awesome, man.
You know, and just trying to, you know, I was saying to another old friend who lives in Sydney last night, having a long chat to him, and just saying, man, these things need to just be talked about and demystified a bit, and, you know, like, and
teenagers are, to their credit, because my students, I teach, they have to make a doco at AUT, and we tell them they have to do it on a social issue, and increasingly in the last couple of years, I'm noticing a lot of them are doing it on mental health and so on. We're going to get out of here. One last thing I want to say about that is, I'm not sure if you're aware, it might be timely, is Tom Larkin from Shehad is doing a whole lot of stuff around Australasia about mental health in the music industry at the moment. He's speaking on radio stations and TV. You know, so there's a movement around that, and I'm sure you might not know him from Adam, but if you got in touch around that, he'd be receptive.
Yeah, fantastic. Hey, look, thanks for having me, man, and what an honour to be number 50.
Yeah, number 50.
After I made you make me number 50.
Hey, man, you actually solved the problem. We've got to get out of here. Okay, cheers.